It started quietly, a ripple before the storm, a hospital in Milan, a care home in Rotterdam, a ship docked in Rotterdam. Different places, same cry for help. We're short on staff, and nothing works without the Filipinos. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type interested in the comments, and I will give you a heart. Europe has just realized what the rest of the world already knew, that behind every functioning system lies a Filipino holding the line. The moment Filipinos stopped arriving, Europe's gears began to grind, slowly at first, then all at once. From the United Kingdom to Germany, France to Italy, you'll find the same truth whispered in hospital corridors and kitchen halls. Filipinos aren't just part of Europe's workforce, they are the workforce that keeps its heart beating. Without them, Europe's economy loses its pulse. Look at the numbers. The UK's National Health Service employs more than 30,000 Filipino nurses, making them one of the largest foreign workforces in the British medical system. In Italy, over 165,000 Filipinos provide elderly and home care, representing 60% of private caregivers. In Spain, Filipino caregivers are described as ángeles de la paciencia, angels of patience, because when no one else stays, the Filipinos remain. Yet for years, European governments treated this as convenient labor, cheap, reliable, invisible. But the pandemic changed everything. When lockdowns hit and global mobility froze, Europe saw what life looked like without Filipinos. Hospitals lost efficiency, care homes were understaffed, cruise ships stopped sailing, and economies that depended on silent hands began to shake. Then came 2025, aging populations, rising healthcare costs, and a shrinking local workforce unwilling to take the demanding jobs that Filipinos once filled with pride. Suddenly, Europe faced a reality it had ignored for decades. You can't replace heart, resilience, and compassion with automation or policy. And now the panic has begun. Governments from London to Lisbon are holding crisis meetings asking the same question: where are the Filipinos? The answer is simple. They've moved on to Canada, to Japan, to New Zealand. Nations offering better treatment, higher pay, and genuine respect. The world finally learned the secret. Filipinos don't just fill positions, they fill emotional gaps that no policy can design. In Italy, employers report emotional withdrawal among the elderly since many Filipino caregivers return home or transferred to other countries. In the UK, nursing homes are forced to close wards due to staff shortages. In France, hotels are cutting guest capacity because housekeeping teams, once dominated by Filipinos, are thinning out. But here's the irony. Europe, a continent that once dominated global power, now finds itself dependent on the people it once considered replaceable. The tables have turned. The servants of yesterday have become the backbone of today's civilization. And this is not a small issue, it's systemic. Every major European economy faces a demographic time bomb. The average age in Europe is now 43 compared to the Philippines, 25. That means Europe is aging fast, retiring faster, and reproducing slower. Their survival depends on youth, and that youth is Filipino. And yet, despite this reality, many European systems still haven't learned to value them properly. There are Filipinos working double shifts to cover staff shortages while still sending money back home to build schools, pay tuition, and feed families. They endure long nights in foreign hospitals and miss birthdays, anniversaries, and the sound of their own children growing up, all to keep the lights of Europe's hospitals shining. But something inside the Filipino spirit is shifting. They're no longer content with being helpers. They're demanding recognition as professionals, contributors, and equals. And rightly so, because when a Filipino nurse stabilizes a patient in London, when a caregiver comforts a dying grandmother in Rome, or when a ship mechanic in Rotterdam keeps the supply chain running, they are literally saving lives, economies, and nations. Europe is realizing it too late, and that realization has caused quiet panic. Behind every government briefing and recruitment campaign lies the unspoken truth. We can't survive without them. The British Medical Association called it a humanitarian crisis within the workforce. Italy's labor minister recently admitted that without migrant workers, our social system would collapse. Spain's elder care sector publicly warned of a dangerous shortage of compassion. And who provides that compassion? Filipinos. And this is the moment the world finally acknowledges what we've always known. Filipinos don't just work abroad, they hold the global system together. Europe may build robots, but it can't replicate empathy. It can print money, but not trust. It can legislate fairness, but not loyalty. And as the continent scrambles to fill the void, one uncomfortable truth is echoing through its capitals. Europe's future is Filipino. So the question haunting Europe tonight isn't just how did we get here, but what happens if Filipinos decide they've had enough? Because if that day ever comes, hospitals will close, airports will stall, and the comfort of millions will vanish overnight. If you're proud to be Filipino, hit that like button right now, because the world is finally seeing what we've known all along. And while you're here, type respect in the comments so the world knows who's truly keeping it alive. Stay with me, because in the next part, we'll reveal how Europe's dependence became so deep, so undeniable, that even their governments can't hide it anymore. Here's what most people don't see. Europe's strength today is quietly being carried on the backs of Filipino workers. You won't find that in any government report, but if you walk through the corridors of Europe's hospitals, classrooms, airports, and care homes, the sound you'll hear is the heartbeat of the Filipino spirit. From the outside, Europe looks composed, organized, advanced, and stable. But peel back the layers and you'll find a hard truth. Remove the Filipinos and the system starts to crumble. According to the European Commission's 2025 Labor Outlook report, Europe will need at least 11 million additional healthcare and social care workers by 2030 to sustain its aging population. 11 million. That's an entire country's worth of people. But where will they find them? The answer, as history keeps proving, is the Philippines. Right now, there are more than 200,000 Filipinos working in the UK, over 170,000 in Italy, and tens of thousands scattered across Germany, Spain, France, and Norway, all quietly powering nations that would otherwise grind to a halt. The UK's NHS, one of the largest public health systems in the world, is heavily dependent on Filipino nurses. 1 in every 8 foreign nurses is Filipino. Germany has created direct recruitment pipelines with Manila to fill hospital shortages. Italy and Spain rely so deeply on Filipino caregivers that many senior citizens refuse replacements from any other nationality. That's not preference, that's trust earned through years of care, sacrifice, and reliability. But here's where it gets shocking. As Europe's population continues to age, its birth rate continues to fall. The average age in Europe is 43.9 years old, while in the Philippines it's just 25.3. Europe is running out of young workers to care for the old, and Filipinos are filling that generational gap. Now imagine what happens if those Filipino workers suddenly vanish. Hospitals would lose efficiency overnight. Planes would be grounded, care homes would collapse, and this isn't hypothetical. In 2024, Italy reported a 12% decrease in available foreign caregivers due to stricter visa laws. The result? Thousands of elderly were left without assistance for weeks. The government had to plead with the Philippines to resume deployment. That's how fragile Europe's system has become. But then another shift began. Filipinos realized they had options. Countries like Canada, Japan, and New Zealand started offering higher pay, citizenship pathways, and better living conditions. And just like that, Europe began losing its most valuable resource, Filipino dedication. That's when leaders started to panic. Germany accelerated its triple win recruitment program. The UK opened fast-track visas for Filipino healthcare workers. Spain proposed a Filipino labor agreement. It's a global race for one nationality, the one the world once underestimated. Why? Because Filipinos don't just show up for work, they show up with heart. Whether it's a nurse comforting a dying patient in London or a caregiver holding the hand of an Alzheimer's patient in Milan, the Filipino way of working is fueled by something Europe can't replicate: empathy born from family value. And that's what makes Filipinos irreplaceable. But there's a danger hidden in this admiration. Europe isn't just respecting Filipino labor, it's becoming dependent on it, dangerously so. Dependence that could easily turn into exploitation if unchecked. Because let's be honest, for every nurse applauded, there's another worker underpaid. For every hero, there's a domestic helper enduring long hours without rest. Filipinos abroad carry the weight of gratitude and the burden of silence. They don't complain, they endure. But maybe, just maybe, it's time to change that. If you're watching this and you've worked abroad or you know someone who did, comment proud Pinoy below. Because that phrase isn't just about pride, it's about claiming visibility in a world that has depended on Filipino labor for decades while pretending it's invisible. Now here's the real twist. Europe's dependence isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. Between 2020 and 2025, Filipino remittances to Europe grew by 38%, making them one of the largest sources of household income in multiple EU states. That means Filipinos aren't just helping European families, they're literally helping European economies. And yet, back home, many of these workers still struggle to build a future. While Europe's elderly rest peacefully, their Filipino caregivers stay awake in small rooms, counting the days until they can go home. Still, they endure. Still, they smile. Still, they send money. That's not just resilience, that's love turned into labor. But now, Europe's starting to realize that this love isn't infinite. Filipinos are becoming more aware of their global power. They're negotiating higher wages, demanding better treatment, and saying no to exploitation. And here's where it gets interesting. When a group of people who've been silently carrying the world suddenly learns their worth, everything changes. Europe is waking up to a new reality. The Filipino worker is no longer a backup plan, they're the lifeline. So when you see the headlines saying Europe needs more workers, remember, they don't mean just anyone, they mean Filipinos. And if that makes you proud, share this video with someone who still thinks Filipinos are replaceable, because we're not. Stay tuned. Europe is praising Filipinos louder than ever. You'll hear it in speeches, read it in news headlines, even see it on government press releases. We value the Filipino workforce. But behind those polite words lies something deeper, something strategic. Because when a continent suddenly showers another nation's people with gratitude, it's rarely just about appreciation, it's about survival and control. Europe has realized that it can't function without Filipinos. And now, the goal isn't just to thank them, it's to keep them. But here's the catch. Not as equals, not as partners, but as a permanent labor force. A workforce they can depend on forever without ever truly empowering them to rise beyond it. Let's break it down. In 2025, the European Labor Dependence Index showed that migrant labor now contributes over 15% of Europe's service sector output, with Filipinos being the single most reliable demographic. Hospitals, airlines, and elder care facilities rely on Filipino stability more than on their own citizens. So what's the plan? Step 1, secure the pipeline. Countries like Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom are quietly signing mobility partnerships with the Philippines. Agreements that sound empowering, but actually lock Filipino workers into specific industries for decades. Step 2, reshape immigration. The EU's new flexible skills visa makes it easier for Filipinos to work abroad, but harder for them to gain citizenship. That means Europe gets the benefit of Filipino excellence without offering the same rights or protections long-term citizens receive. Step 3, cultural normalization. Have you noticed how the phrase Filipino caregiver or Filipino nurse has become standard language across Europe? That's not just coincidence, it's conditioning. Filipinos are now subconsciously tied to service roles. The danger? Generations of European children growing up to associate Filipino with servant instead of leader. That's where this whole narrative turns tragic. Because while Europe says we can't survive without Filipinos, what it really means is we can't survive without Filipino labor. And that's a big difference. It's the difference between appreciation and dependency, between respect and subtle exploitation. Filipinos are saving lives in London hospitals, but how many of them get promoted to senior medical leadership? They're managing hotels in Italy, but how many sit in the boardroom? They're running ships across the Mediterranean, but how many own the fleet? Europe loves the Filipino work ethic, but still fears Filipino leadership. And that's the real conversation we need to start having. Because if the Philippines doesn't step up now with policies, support systems, and education programs that protect and elevate overseas workers, Europe will continue to depend on Filipinos not out of mutual respect, but out of necessity. And necessity is not the same as equality. According to the OECD's 2025 Labor Equity Report, migrant workers from Southeast Asia still earn 27% less than their European counterparts for identical roles. Many are overqualified, engineers working as cleaners, teachers serving as caregivers, simply because of systemic bias and limited opportunities to advance. But something's changing. The Filipino identity abroad is evolving. The new generation of OFWs isn't just looking for a paycheck, they're looking for purpose, dignity, and growth. They're saying, if you need us, then treat us as partners, not property. That's the awakening Europe didn't expect. Filipinos across Europe are forming unions, advocacy groups, and professional networks. Nurses in Ireland are petitioning for leadership roles. Caregivers in Italy are launching community-led cultural centers. Tech workers in Berlin are breaking stereotypes by founding startups that compete directly with local firms. This isn't just labor migration anymore, it's silent revolution. And here's the twist. Europe may think it's holding Filipinos in place, but the truth is, Filipinos are the ones reshaping Europe. Because every time a Filipino teaches a European child empathy, every time a Filipino nurse comforts a patient's last breath, every time an OFW sends money home to build a school in Manila or Davao, they're not just sustaining the system, they're redefining what power looks like. And soon, Europe will realize something even more shocking. The future they're trying to control is already being written by the very people they tried to contain. But here's the question we need to ask ourselves. Will the Philippines be ready when that shift happens? Will we continue exporting heroes, or will we finally invest in the same heroes to bring their power back home? Because make no mistake, the world can't survive without Filipinos, but neither can the Philippines if we lose too many of our best to foreign shores. The real challenge isn't getting recognized abroad, it's getting respected at home.